All right, back to me again. Good afternoon. I know that this is the last session of the day and everybody's a little bit tired, sleepy in the afternoon, the sunny afternoon. So I thought I'll start my session of such a heavy topic, succession planning, with a joke. How about that? Okay, so the joke starts off, a large company CEO resigns, and this resignation came as a surprise to the board and HR. By the time the new CEO was hired into place, the previous CEO was gone for a long time. And so the new CEO saw the notes from the previous CEO on his desk. Corner office, the previous CEO left a sticky note on the desk with 3 envelopes. On the sticky note, it says, if you're ever in trouble, open these envelopes. And the new guy is a young, energetic, overly confident, doesn't care much guy. He thought, I will be so smart, I'll be fine. So he put the envelopes away into the drawer and started making changes to the organization. He had some really good ideas, implemented a whole bunch of programs. However, 6 months went by, the culture of the organization is just so bad he couldn't change much. He took a deep sigh in his office and he's thinking like, what should I do? And then all of a sudden he remembered the 3 envelopes. So he opened the first one. There is only one sentence in the first envelope. It says, blame me, which means blame the previous CEO. So he swore everything off his chest, felt much better, and back to work again. 3 months later, he found himself in the same boat. He couldn't do much. He couldn't make the company run as profitable as he was hoping for. Felt depleted. So he sat in his chair and started opening the second envelope. Inside the second envelope, there's again just one sentence. Reorganization. And the young guy is like, wow, that's brilliant. Isn't that what any companies do anyway when they're in trouble? So he fired a couple of executives, restructured the company, and he thought that would solve the problem himself. And a couple of months later, same boat, sat in the office, opened the last envelope. And the last envelope inside the envelope has only one sentence again. Prepare 3 envelopes. So that's the story. That's the joke of succession planning, which is saying when a company does not have a proper succession plan, things like this do happen, right? And I do want to share with you 3 live examples that happened around me. An adult student came to one of the trainings that delivered on HR basics for managers. Cindy is her name. At the age of 60, she started taking HR basics training. She owned a restaurant, a pretty good restaurant with her husband for 15 years. When the kids were young, when they needed help, the kids were helping out at the restaurant. So the parents assumed that whenever they retire, one of the kids will take it over. Never had a conversation until health became a problem. They needed to retire, hoping to change ownership to one of the kids. However, none of the kids was interested. At the end, they have to shut off the business. So the lessons learned here is when there is no succession planning, the business may not continue at all. Second example, a good friend of mine started a nonprofit volunteer organization in Edmonton about 6 years ago. He founded an organization with a bunch of really passionate volunteers, wanted to do things. And for the first 4 years, they grew the organization from 0 member to close to 1,000 members. And they ran a whole bunch of large-scale social events and created job opportunities, social activities for the members. So the organization was well received, except they burned all the volunteers and board members. Everybody was volunteer. On top of their work, life, school, they felt we need succession planning. Because we can't just keep doing this, we need someone to train so we can move on in our lives. The president kept pushing it away because he was just like, let's just get the event out first, and then we'll talk about it. So keep pushing it to the point that one day a couple of the senior board members and volunteers came to him saying, enough is enough, we're out here. So lessons learned there is that when there is no succession planning, it can actually decrease the morale. The last example, so this is a large organization here in Western Canada, and the company is doing very well financially. It's in the traditional industry, and hence is their HR practice is also very traditional. Never thought about succession planning. The previous CEO resigns after being in the role for 10 years. So as a retirement, he resigns. And now HR started scrambling and wanted to find replacements. First, they looked internally. None of the VPs or senior directors either have the interest or the competencies. They started looking externally, even hired executive search firm. Finally, they found a person they felt was perfect fit, brought that person, relocated him, took a very long time, cost lots of money from a far location to this organization. The new CEO had a very drastic different style, leadership philosophy, made a whole bunch of changes very early on in his journey at the company. The younger employees really appreciated his style, but not the older or more longer tenured employees, especially those senior executives who had been with the previous CEO for a very long time. And to everybody's surprise, the new CEO resigned just after 2 years being in the role because he didn't feel that what he could do could change the culture of the organization. So lessons learned here is that when the organization doesn't have a proper succession plan, then the culture, we also did not consider the cultural fit of the CEO even. That could also be an issue. Long story short, so I kept talking about a joke and the 3 examples of succession planning, how they could fail. What exactly is succession planning? I'm not very smart to come up with a comprehensive definition, so I cheated and I searched on Wikipedia. And so according to Wikipedia, succession planning is a process. So it's a process that organization ensures employees are recruited and developed for the critical roles within the company. And because it's a process, so we want to make sure that our employees, their knowledge are transferred, are sustained, skills, abilities are developed, and so they're prepared for the future advancements. That sounds really long, doesn't it? So I took the liberty of simplifying it. My version of the definition, succession planning, is really to have the right people for the critical roles at the right time. What do we mean by critical roles? I'll talk about it, but it could mean different things for different people at different organizations and industries. So in the next, let's say 5 minutes instead of 10, if you can talk with your neighbor about, on a scale between 1 and 10, how would you rate your organization's succession plan? So you have none, then your rating would be below 1. And why your organization treats succession planning as a priority or not as a priority. So let's do 5 minutes of that. All right, ladies, I heard some really good discussions at your small tables or small groups. So how would you rate your organization's succession planning? Please show me on your fingers, with your fingers. Doesn't exist. Okay, all right.
Family restaurant.
Okay. So anywhere between minus to a +8. Okay, that's really interesting, which is not uncommon, right? So organizations, a lot of them actually don't have anything related to succession. Some organizations have a comprehensive system really well set up. So the 2 in the room that don't have much to do with succession planning, why is it not a priority for your organizations?
They think family's going to take it over.
They assume the family will take it over. And the truth is, we'll find out, I guess.
In our world, it's a little bit different. We just had our CEO of 35 or 37 years retire.
Okay.
And he was a very top-down manager. So it's about, it doesn't really matter. Nobody else needs to know. Mm. So his assistant basically accepted the role.
Yeah.
Which originally she was hired to be kind of groomed for it, but he wouldn't share anything.
Oh, okay.
So then now she's in it. So, and she's a very different leader. She's more about accountability. Managers are accountable to, staff is accountable to their leaders and all of that sort of thing. Be responsible for your area.
Yeah.
So it's a huge culture change going on right now.
Excellent.
But there are people, like myself, who there was maybe some stifling that there's a few of us that have stepped up to say, we can do this as a team.
Yeah.
And so lots more responsibilities on certain people, but it will become a priority.
Yeah.
Hence this type of training and learning, right? So
great.
It'll help.
Yeah. So it's getting there. It's a process to take. Yeah. Okay. Excellent. All right. So that's good discussion. And so you probably wonder, okay, we have these two organizations. One doesn't have much to do with succession planning. The other one is just coming up with the process. But actually, there are some really great stories around us. The American politics, as Doug alluded to multiple times, is a great example of it. And despite what's happening right now in the White House, so the succession planning with the presidential role actually started in 1792. A couple hundred years ago, right? So according to the Presidential Succession Act, so if the president cannot continue in his role, the vice president will take over. If the vice president cannot continue in his or her role, then the Speaker of the House will take over, so on and so forth. And you're probably like, okay, that's American politics, have nothing to do with us here in Canada. All right, there are also successful business examples around us. So in 2016, after Marriott, the hotel chain, acquired Starwood Hotel Properties, they become the largest hotel company in the world. It's still a large family-owned business. In 2012, when the previous CEO and chairman, Bill Marriott, retired, he was having a dilemma whether he should put his son, who had grown his career inside the company, into the CEO's position, or another person who is his right hand into the CEO's position. So Aaron Sorensen was the chief executive at that time before he became the CEO. He was the first non-family member who was picked as the CEO. So he stepped in. So it was a hard decision, but according to Bill Marriott, he believed that succession planning should really take time and process. It's disruptive, and the person who loses inevitably ends up leaving the company. I didn't want that, so he does not want the process to be rushed. Another really good example is McDonald's. Who has not eaten at McDonald's before? It's actually one of my favorites, fast food chains. And so I don't know if you have heard about the story, but in 2004, the CEO at that time, James Cantalupo, he was about to meet 12,000 employees, vendors, franchisees in a conference in the southern states, and he died of heart attack just that morning before he head into the meeting. So that happens, and but at that time, lucky enough, they had someone in the pipeline. Charles Bell, he stepped into the CEO's role. He was groomed to be the next successor, so he could take it over very quickly. Lucky enough. But the unfortunate part of it is that he was only in the role for 6 months, and then he resigned because he was diagnosed of cancer. And right after that, there was another person in the pipeline. He was James Skinner. He became the CEO. He was groomed to be the next leader of the company. He didn't expect that to happen that quickly. But lucky enough, he was able to take it over. So to avoid the back-to-back CEO tragedy, he was still able to sustain the business and make it run just as smoothly as previously. So after he became the CEO, he was famous to do one thing. He walked around all the different divisions and branches and restaurants and talk to the leaders of these locations and say, can you name 2 people in your location who can succeed your position? And if you can, you're in trouble. So that was his attitude. He believed that you should, as a manager, you should always have someone in your back mind. Even if you have nobody internally, okay, what's the plan here? So that's what he believed in. And then when he retired, he was very confident that the COO he had groomed for 7 years was ready to take over. So he had to make sure that there was someone in the pipeline, always happened. So he wasn't need to worry when he retired. So those were the really great examples about succession for the senior level positions. And succession planning should not be short, should not be rushed. It should not be a one-time deal. And succession plan can take up to many years. But the average, you want to test out your system, you build it, you want to test out your system, you train people, it can take up to 5 years or beyond, depends on scale of your organization. And leaders really need to see the importance of it, accept the need of succession planning. So in the example that one of our audience here shared, in her organization, the previous CEO or the general manager had a drastic different style of not recognizing the value of succession planning because he believed he is it, right? And so he didn't take this seriously. But the question is, okay, even if our leaders understand the importance of succession plan, where do we begin? So the rest of the presentation, I want to walk you through the processes of how to do a succession plan. Start with internal scanning. Always ask ourselves, do internal analysis. Why we need to do it, what is involved here, how we're going to do it, who should be involved, and what are the timelines for us. So identify the why. Why do we care about succession planning? And that's why many companies fail to have that in place, is that they don't recognize the importance of it. Very importantly, in those examples I shared, it's about ensuring the continuation of the business. Whatever is important to ensure the continuation of. It could be changes in the senior leadership positions due to personal reasons. It could be changes in the business environment that now we just need a different approach or strategies to continue with the business. It could also to ensure that we have smooth or even better processes, products, and services so we can continue the competitive advantage of our business. Have you heard about the tragedy of Williams Engineering in Edmonton in 2008, the airplane crash? That was a really sad story, but a good example of why succession planning is really important. In the year of 2008, the CEO at that time and another executive, they both died in an airplane crash going to a meeting. So it was a small private plane. And 5 months later, exactly 5 months later, the son of the previous CEO who passed away, along with 3 other executives, died in another airplane crash going to a conference in Manitoba. So if we think that the continuation of business is not important, we would be lying. In those situations, it's good that they have someone in-house to succeed the leadership positions, because tragedies in business do happen. Changes in lives do happen. And identify the what. What are we ensuring? What are we sustaining here? It could be the products, services, the reputation, the marketplace, the financial margins, and etc. The products and services, what if our critical positions are those with strength in technical positions? If we lose them, are we losing our core competencies and the competitive advantage to other competitors if we lose these key technicians? It could also be our functional areas that we're proud of. We want to make sure the continuity of supply chain, HR, marketing, R&D, research and development, customer service, etc. Or it could be our growth position in the marketplace. So basically, again, going back to the question I asked you this morning, what are our core competencies? What are the products, services, processes, functions, and ideas or technologies that drive us apart from the competition? What makes us us? And what kind of knowledge, skills, and characteristics that we need the successors to have in order to maintain our core competencies? In other words, in order for us to maintain competitiveness in the marketplace. So now we know it's important, we know the purpose, and we know the core competency of our organization. We identify the what's. Let's identify the how. The how has 3 components. Who should be involved in the succession planning process? Not just who should be doing it, but who should be involved. What kind of tools are we using? The what parts. And then what about the timeline, the when? So let's first talk about the people. Critical positions need to satisfy 2 elements. Which position in our organization drives the delivery of key strategies and key services for our business? So keep that in mind. Think about it in your organization. What are the key positions that drive these? Second question, which position, if left vacant, will create a problem for us in our business? So can you think about 2 positions that satisfy both elements in your company, in your organization? For some organization, it could be the CEO or the COO or the controller. For some organization, it's their technical, highly specialized technical expert positions. Ask yourself, What are the 2 key positions in our company, in our organization? You may have more than 2. That's okay too. Because every organization is different. Just because I work in the banking industry for our organization, if I think the CEO is the most critical role, it doesn't mean for a nonprofit that CEO is the most important role, right? So it really depends on the organization you're in, the industry, and the current situation you are in. So once we identify the 2 critical positions we want to have successors for, then let's identify how do we get there? What do we need to achieve that? So first, we need to look at our talent gap. Very similar to the idea we talked about this morning. What's the current workforce situation, so the supply, versus where we're going to achieve tomorrow, the future, so the demand. And what about the gap? How do we address the gap in between? Do we have internal successors, potential successors? So the 9-box that I introduced this morning is a really great tool that you could also use for succession planning purposes. Identify the performance, identify the potential, and see who can be the successors for those key positions you've identified. When we know the kind of traits and behaviors we want from our potential successors, we ask ourselves, what kind of performance do we want? Same as when you are in school, just because you have a 4.0 GPA, it doesn't mean you can do the work, right? So you could have the perfect technical skill, it doesn't mean you have the perfect people skill. So what exactly hard skill or performance will you want to see from these potential successors? And what about the soft skills? So what are the behaviors and skills we want to see from our potential successors? What about leadership styles? What about behaviors or other characteristics? And this person has to understand our values, culture, product, services, mission, vision, all of these things. They understand it, they integrate themselves well with our organization's product, services, values, culture, and etc., and can still lead us forwards. And they're committed, and they have a vision. So about that high potential we talked about this morning. Do we have the ability to develop from within? So if we use the 9-boxer as a tool, as a stepping stone to look at how many potential successors we have, maybe we have 0. Maybe we have lots. So how many, or do we have enough or good candidates to develop from within to succeed those critical positions? If not, then maybe we need to hire externally. How long does it take? Which market should we look at? Where can we find them? Those will be the next questions. And then, very importantly, let's make sure that the CEO example I talked about, the CEO quit after 2 years, that doesn't happen in our organization. We want to make sure if we have to go externally, the person we hire can be integrated into our organization. The tools. So right now, I would like to point you to the handouts. There is one page about succession planning. It's a company ABC succession planning charts. And so one thing I do want to correct there is under sales director, it should be December 2018 instead of March 2018. I live backwards, that's why. So at your, with your partner at your table, if you can discuss 3 questions. That's on the back of the page. Number 1 question, I want to transition, so transfer Bob into the current CEO's position, groom Bob into that position. What will be our main discussion points to continue the organization and sustain the business? Second question, we need to retain Jennifer, train Lily. What are some of the approaches or methods that our organization can take into consideration? And our internal successors' interest in moving up. How do we know if they have interest? So flipping back to the front page, on this chart, so I have helped you to identify 4 critical positions in company ABC. And then based on workforce analysis, we had identified anticipated departure dates. We have some in-house successors. Some are ready now, some are ready in a short time, some are ready in a longer time. And those in-house successors' time length, time frame also give us the priorities and the ripple effects. So have a read of this chart, and then have a discussion with your partner about the 3 questions at the back of this sheet. So let's do 10 minutes. Everybody's good. Great. Let's hear some answers. So as an organization, we identified Bob as the CEO's successor. Hopefully he's interested. Hopefully he's not going to leave before July 2019. So the question for you is, okay, now the current CEO wants to transition the role to Bob. What are some of the major discussion points?
Retention, Bob.
Retain Bob? Yeah, that's definitely one thing. What are the things they're going to discuss about to transition Bob into the role? Training, okay. Yeah. So the current CEO's leadership style, he or she would explain, and also inquire about Bob's leadership style philosophy. Yeah, what else?
Bob to interview externally for the sales director.
Okay, so Bob can be the hiring manager for the exiting sales director position, which gives him a exposure to a senior level position recruitment experience. What else?
Be looking for his own management style in that person.
Yeah, it could be that too. Yeah. So we hire for the right fit, right? We talked about that last month's session. The right fit could be someone who is culturally suitable for the organization. What else would be the discussion points there?
Ask James if he wants to take on the business. They're looking externally for a sales director.
Yeah, sorry, we're still on the Bob conversation. So just between the current CEO and the Bob, for Bob to take over the CEO's position, what would you suggest the current CEO say to Bob? Like, what are the major discussion points? Yeah, absolutely. So what are the business objectives? We know the vision, we know the mission, we know the values, all that fluff is on our websites. So you should know that better, right? But what are the true objectives for the business in short run, in the medium term, and the long run? What else do we need to know? Absolutely. Bob's vision and his leadership style, absolutely, that's critical, right? How he sees the company will go forward, and use this as a brainstorming opportunity with the current CEO, his mentor or coach, whatever you want to call him or her, and bounce ideas off of each other. Yeah, absolutely. And what else? If you are the exiting CEO, maybe you're retiring or maybe you won a lottery, you just want to leave, how can you help Bob to be successful? Absolutely. Yeah, so mock roles, activities, doing the activities together, introducing him as the successor, social settings, business settings. What else would you do?
I don't know, having situations as a team instead of
Situations, having Bob make decisions and having him be the second eye, pair of eyes. Yeah, it could be that too. The other thing I was going to mention was that sharing about politics, past mistakes, learnings, especially politics about the boards, right? Or politics about the executive team, and what the current CEO wants to achieve but was not able to do just yet. It's helping Bob to set priorities, basically. Help him set priorities, help him clear of some of the hurdles or challenges or barriers, and give him tools and resources, help him to build the network, the senior executive level of network. Busy, right? A lot of things to talk about. So the current CEO better have a plan, step by step, what I'm going to do this month, what I'm going to do next month. And also, I'll make sure that the information is well received by Bob. It's not too rushed. It's not too much. It's one at a time. Quite a few things. So that's for the first question. The second question is about retaining Jennifer and training Lily. So let's look at the COO. So the current COO is still in the position. He may leave tomorrow or he may stay there for a very long time. But Jennifer is ready to take over the COO's position now, which means that if we don't have something to offer to Jennifer during a short period of time, maybe she wants to look elsewhere. So what can we do to retain Jennifer?
Offer her to do the sales director internally, like co-direct?
Yeah, she could be the interim sales director until we find a replacement. It could be that. That's a good idea. She may not have the exact experience or skills in sales, which could be a stretch assignment for her and gives her a challenge, keeps her excited. What else can we do with retaining her?
She could help Lily develop skills.
Could mentor or coach Lily? Yeah, absolutely. That's great. And she could coach or mentor other people within the organization. Give her a bigger team. Assign her more employees to manage. That could be the challenge. What else can we do to retain her?
Provide for training.
Give her more training. Give her more coaching. And you had a point. Growth. How do you mean by that?
Have a conversation with Jennifer as to what she would like for growth. What would...
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a really good point, is that ask Jennifer directly, what do you want? How can we help, right? So there's no better than, let's not assume, let's not guess, let's have a direct conversation with the employee. You're a high performer, you're high potential. We want to make sure you're happy, satisfied, engaged here, and we want to retain you. How can we help you? We just don't have the CEO position for you right now. Let's be honest about it. And you'd be surprised how the employees sometimes can be honest and come up with creative ideas and bounce ideas off of with you. It could be that. Yeah, that's excellent. So the ripple effect is if we spend all the time and energy retaining Jennifer, making her hopeful, making her happy, we also make sure that Tyler is not wanting to leave us either. Because Tyler will be ready in 3+ years, not as soon as Jennifer. Jennifer is ready right now. So Tyler will be ready to be in a leadership role in 3+ years. So in 3+ years, if Jennifer is still here and COO is still here, right? So that means there may not be that level of position ready for Tyler. So the same question, same conversation may happen again with Tyler. The other side of the question is about Lily. So Lily will be ready for the sales director position in 2 or 3 years, rough estimates. She's not ready at this moment. If we have Jennifer doing the sales director in the interim, or if we look externally hiring someone else, then Lily may become a problem. We need to retain her if we hire somebody else, right? So how can we retain her? How can we train her? Growth and training, pretty much. Yeah, the same kind of conversation. Hey, Lily, this is our situation. How can we help? And what do you want? So the exact same conversation as between Jennifer and Lily. And so I also wrote some cheat sheet here for you, is that when we are considering retention and training, enrichment of current role or giving them a bigger team to manage, to lead, coach other people, chair a special project, or change to another role that he or she has never done before. All of those could be considered growth opportunities and challenges. And then the last question I think we already alluded to is, are the internal successors interested in those positions? Have that candid conversation with them, basically, and be open about their strengths, weaknesses, their potential, their performance, right? And you could also ask them to self-identify their weaknesses and see what you can do as their leader, and also ask themselves to come up with a development plan of themselves. It's usually easier perceived when employees come up with their own development plan than being voluntold by the manager, right? And let's also remember, when it comes to learning and development and growing our career, that lots of people say, go to a training. But you know, by sitting here for an entire day, how much information you really have sustained and will retain, right? We talk about that we lose the knowledge 20% year after year that we learn in school. Same thing with training. So with adult learners, 70% of our learning, not the training, the learning actually is transferred, is retained by doing it, by doing things on the job. So that's how we learn as adults, 70%. The 20% is learning by sharing, mingling, networking, socializing with our coworkers, industry experts, with seniors, coaches, peers, mentors, all of these things. Only 10% is the classroom setting training. It could also be your webinar, your seminar, your conferences, you're going to a certification course or HR in a Box series, and so on and so forth. And so let's now mix that with many companies will do the exact opposite. 70% classroom training. You go sit in the classroom, get your certificate, you now can be a CEO. And they put only 10% on the social aspect, which is completely a mistake.
I
1 sec, let's give you this microphone.
I guess didn't see the internal successor, so I said, well, having a worker interview with all of the employees to see if there was somebody down deep in the employees that would like to, or spending a day in the day of a sales director for all the other employees, just to see if there was somebody that would want to do that.
Yeah, that could be it too. So it's another conversation to happen usually at the beginning of the year when we do the goal setting with our employee. Sit down, talk about the goals of the year, but also talk about goals of yourself, right? The ideal goal setting, well, I mean, these days the goal settings are always cascading top-down approach. This is what the company wants you to do, and this is what department wants you to do. This is what manager wants you to do, and that goal gets cascaded down to the employee level that become transferred into our roles. How many companies really have another approach, combine a hybrid approach with both the cascading top-down approach and as well as bottom-up approach, is saying, employee, I have a long-term career vision, and this translates into what I'm going to do in short term, translates to what I'm going to do this year, and that goals, my goal and the company's goal are aligned. That'll be perfect. And that's the perfect opportunity for the managers and HRs to talk to the employees saying, what would you like to achieve in your career? How can we help? Do you have the willingness to move up? Or do you have the willingness to take on bigger challenges? So that will be another opportunity for us to find out. But the flip side of it, I may have the willingness, I may think I have the potential, but the reality of it could be a different story, right? So let's not get hope up that just because I have the willingness and think I have the potential, I'm going to be the successor. It takes many factors to play to make a successful situation. But that's a great suggestion. Any other comments about that exercise?
And just really get you thinking about how to set it up right.
Well, and the domino effect, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
What happens and
Yeah. So it's a thoughtful process. It takes a very long time. It takes systematic planning. And there is a domino or ripple effect about if you put one person here, what's going to happen to that person's role, what's going to happen to the next successor, and so on and so forth. So succession planning, as we had talked about, it really is a lengthy and a careful planned approach. So it should not be rushed, like Bill Marriott had mentioned in his quotes. All right, so putting this all together, with succession planning, first we need to identify the why. we need to understand, and leadership needs to buy in, need to bite it, need to buy into the purpose while we're doing succession planning. Otherwise, it may not be successful. Get leaders' commitment and support. One way of doing that is put that into the CEO and the executives' performance evaluation. Have that as one of their objectives. Have a succession plan started. And indicate what needs to be covered in our succession planning process, who needs to be involved, the tools we need to develop and use, and identify the critical positions, like how we did in the session today, and who we have in a talent pipeline. Prepare those talents, retention, training, growth, switching jobs, switching roles, challenges, special projects, all of that. We confirm and follow the timeline, the action plan. We implement it, but we constantly monitor it. Make sure that everything is going by the plan. And if there are things we need to do better, we can adjust it, fix it, constantly evaluate, coming back to the plan and keep evaluating it. This is my belief of the tools and resources we use in HR. None of it is stale. It's always a living document. It doesn't mean today we develop policy procedure, it's on a shelf, we never need to look at it, or it's going to be the perfect example in the world. No, it's not. The world is constantly changing. Our industry, economy, our company is constantly changing. So let's make sure that our tools are living tools that's supporting the organization to move forward rather than be stale. And the final tips, many organizations don't have succession planning to start off with because they don't recognize the importance of it. And organizations sometimes they do have the plan, but they still fail. So learn from those mistakes. And succession planning is important, and it should be part of the executive's performance evaluation objective, as well as the overall strategic plan, the overall HR plan, the overall business strategic plan. And then also needs to be part of the organizational leader's performance appraisal. And don't forget about the boards. If we have an active, proactive board, let's make sure the board is also on board with what we're doing here of succession planning. Questions, comments?